Welcome to another episode of The Marketer's Edge, a series designed to share senior level marketing perspective about marketer challenges, opportunities, and agency relationships. Our goal is to help marketers and agencies learn from other marketers across different industries. Today we're talking with John Vincent, the Director of Business Development for Apex Automotive, based in South Carolina. John, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's just enjoying another day here in the changing world of automotive. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was looking forward to it. And I've got a small handful of questions for you. But before I do that, can you tell me a little bit about Apex Automotive and what you do for the organization? I'd like our audience to know, what kind of company it is and what it is you do.
Yeah, so the Apex Automotive Group is based in South Carolina. It's been in business for over 30 years. Um, we've got 4 dealerships. One of the Honda stores has been the number one Honda store in the state of South Carolina for the last 6 years in a row. We're
Great.
pretty proud of that. Um, so my title is a little misleading. So those who are familiar with automotive might hear the word business development and think that I run a BDC call center, which is not the case. It's more of the true meaning of business development. So whether that be, marketing, compliance, process improvement, vendor relationships, negotiations, onboarding, administration, training, analytics, even some light accounting and IT work. I mean, I fixed a printer this morning, so it's do it all.
Got to do what you got to do, right?
I come from that. Yeah, I come from that school of thought where, sorry, she's paging in a live store. But I come from that school of thought that, job security is never saying, no, that's not my job, especially in automotive where if you don't sell cars, so you kind of got to keep as many responsibilities as you possibly can.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm curious, you've been at Apex for over 8 years now, and what are some of the more pronounced changes you've seen in the auto dealer industry over those 8 years?
So we didn't really have to go back 8 years. I mean, we can go back 12 months, 24
Okay.
months, right? So we went from carrying 300 to 500 new cars on the ground to have auxiliary lots because of all the inventory we had to now we've got 200 to 300 pre-orders where customers have placed an order for a car that they haven't driven yet and we're waiting on a truck or that train we talked about earlier to arrive,
Yep.
So I'm sure you've heard of the term COVID pricing. It's around the entire, no matter what industry you're in. So that's a very real, thing that we're combating and that the customer is combating as well. And I don't really see an end in sight in the immediate future to that. So if I were to sum up, over an 8-year span, I would say, it's been an increased adoption of digital advertising across the entire dealership level, a little bit moving away from the traditional ad spend. I've seen transparency come full circle, so we used to be, showing a price online for all of our cars with a payment below it. And if you weren't showing a price on a car, you're basically committing like digital suicide essentially because no one's going to want to call a store that's not showing their price to now all our cars say please call on them. There's also a really big push for digital retailing. So simply put, if you're not in automotive, digital retailing is like completing as much of the transaction online as you can. Good example of that is a lot of the OEMs, you go to their major websites, they'll say like start the buying process now on like the main website for the OEM. So
Right.
that's been a big push. And that's, in my opinion, come more from the OEM and people in the automotive space than actually
Right.
from the customer itself.
Okay.
So
And I'm curious as you look forward over the next, 3, 5, 10 years, what do you think will look different in the industry?
Um, So this is where I kind of got to put my compliance hat on and disclaim everything. This is my own opinion. It doesn't represent Apex Automotive Group or any manufacturer we might represent.
Yep.
It's
All
just
good.
merely my conjecture. So that sound official enough?
Yeah,
So like
absolutely.
what I envision, What I envision in, say, the next decade is going to be a big push by the major OEMs for a more direct-to-consumer sales model.
Okay.
Um, you can see it now with all the pre-orders we're doing as part of our business. We're only carrying a handful of models. The customer comes and drives a few, then places an order for the exact car they want. State franchise laws are their biggest obstacle the OEM has to have, and our biggest lifeline here as a dealership.
Got it.
But with EVs being the next big major push, I think you're going to see dealers carry less inventory and be less of a sales center and more of an education center for the consumer,
Interesting.
educating them about electric vehicles, educating them about the car, less of a sales pitch. And then dealers are going to have to do a big shift towards fixed ops. That's parts and service, the back end of the house. Because a customer's not going to take their Tesla that has a 1,000-watt motor on each hub and do a brake job. You can do that on a Honda Civic. You're not doing that on a car, right? So you got to come to this dealer for service. So that's going to be a big shift for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very interesting, and really, I don't mean you when I say you have the pandemic to thank for it, but really, would imagine the pandemic certainly accelerated that move.
Yeah, correct. I would say that we went from before we had like a slight lockdown earlier in 2019, 2020. We never would have thought of going to the customer's house, picking up their car, bringing it to get serviced, and giving it back to them.
Right.
But the automotive world we had to adapt. So that's one thing car dealers have is they're pretty good at adapting to whatever challenges come up.
Right.
They're pretty maneuverable.
Interesting. I'm curious as you if you look at other countries and how they're set up in terms of car sales. Is the U.S. unique in having sort of that dealer setup, or other countries set up where it is more direct to consumer, or is what we do pretty common across the globe?
I can't speak for across the globe. I can just my own experience. The company I worked for before, I had clients that were in Brazil, actually
Okay.
Rio, which is a very densely populated city, and I had some Fiat dealers, and that's how Fiat did it. They had it would look more like an outlet at your mall. That was your dealership, and then they would keep a couple cars in stock. You would drive which one you want, and then they would keep all the cars inside of a shipping container out at a port, so you don't have to pay import tax until you bought the car. Then they take it off the ship and bring it to you. So versus these stores that have like double-decker dealerships with thousands of cars on the lot.
Right.
It's a
Interesting.
it's a little bit different. But
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it's a lot more. You have to have a lot of capital in order to start a successful dealership down in the United States. There's a lot of the blue sky price for dealerships right now is through the roof. If you don't have $100 million, you can't buy a store. It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm curious how have companies like Carvana affected the dealership business?
I'll try and be cordial about Carvana. They're kind of like a four-letter word in our store. To those who are like outside of the industry, you would think that like Carvana's taken over the world. But if you look at their financials compared to a regular store, they're not really a for-profit business. Their stock price is down 90% in the last 12 months. But what they did do is they made us as car dealerships just tighten up our processes. We can't be loose. We can't be lax with the way that we present our cars online because we're competing with like the Amazon experience for buying a car versus a traditional sales model.
Right.
So you got to have updated technology on your site to make that process of getting a trade-in or financing, that needs to be up to snuff to compete with Carvana. But then Where Carvana falls short is they forgot about all the complexities that come to running a dealership. So the logistics, financing, titling, registration, holding gross on a trade-in, reselling that trade-in. So it goes on, and you're seeing them struggle with that um, when it comes to scale. So. But all that being
Yeah.
said, yeah, Carvana definitely made everybody have to tighten up their sales process to meet that customer expectation.
Oh, that's cool. Well, good for them, right? And good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So I noticed, I was looking at LinkedIn and I noticed that you commented on a post that centered on what was called modern retail marketing. And in the response that you wrote, you asked when one thought the shift to modern retail marketing would reach an inflection point and be adopted. Can you just talk a little bit about this topic of modern retail marketing and what it all means?
Yeah, so I'm not the one that came up with that term, so I can't take credit for it. So
Okay.
that would be Brian Pash. I'm going to define it the way I mean it to mean. And so, the way that it's been presented to me, and my understanding of it is a complete overhaul of basically your approach to the road to the sale, both in store and online. So, for example, like removing traditional lead forms on your site to just have someone do a direct video chat with the customer versus give us your info, we'll call you back. And then a big one is having a single point of contact for buying the car versus having a sales agent, a sales manager, an F&I manager. Um, you just deal with one guy. He pencils your deal, he does all your financing, he calls the banks, and you just check off a couple boxes on an iPad, and you just bought a car. Um, in theory, that all sounds well and good, but in my opinion, you'd be and again, just my opinion, you'd be missing a lot of potential sales and profit due to that, both on the front end and back end of that sale, because, it's a very complex process to buy a car. People like to think it's simple, but it's not. Um, so what I mean by inflection point is when are you going to see dealers drop that traditional sales model and move to that modern one because so many other people around their town or the ASA are doing that. Um,
Okay. So
so that
you
was
are
my question in the post.
yeah. So you
The
so
what
you
now?
are seeing that happen among some dealers.
Not in um, a way that affects how we would change our sales model.
Got it. Okay.
So that was my question in that post. Is like, in the last 8 years I've been in a store, and I mean, this is not exaggerating. I would say maybe one out of every 100 sales agents could actually do that entire sales process, start to
Okay.
finish.
Got it.
Um, Unless you want to hire order takers and turn your store into like, an AT&T store or a Mac store. You're
Right.
basically just taking an order. The customer checks off a couple boxes. Versus a well-run traditional store that's going to have a sales agent that's very knowledgeable about their product. They know the road to the sale. The finance manager is going to be on the phone with banks, trying to get you the best possible rate, come up with a custom warranty that fits your solution. I mean, it's not as easy as like buying a T-shirt off of Amazon.
Right. Right.
It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely see the benefit um, to some degree both ways, but having that finance guy, like you said, finding you the best deal, knowing the warranties inside and out, just being able to provide that benefit to the customer is solid, and asking a sales agent to carry that load not only is distracting in that they you know aren't able to sell as much because they're sort of carrying all that stuff forward, or just maybe not doing it
Right.
as well. So that's kind of interesting, and it'll be interesting just your perspective around kind of where you think the industry is going and how that ultimately intersects with modern retail marketing. Don't I don't have a strong opinion one way or another, but it will be interesting to see how those two things play out. So you also asked
Yeah.
a question in the same response. Will the net to gross mindset need to change in order for mass adoption to take place? You said I'm leaning towards yes, and I was wondering if you could just speak to this and tell our listeners what this all means.
Yeah. So I'll explain when I say the net to gross mindset, I'll just break it down, simply is so net to gross is the amount or the percentage of profit you make, how much net profit you make off of how much gross profit you made off of that one transaction, whether
Okay.
it's sales, service, F&I, parts, doesn't matter. So you have two different mindsets there. You have some dealers that are volume based, where they're just turning and burning, selling as many cars as they possibly can at a lower profit. They got massive advertising budgets. They've got all the great technology, agencies, in-house marketing. They have a Taj Mahal for a dealership. They're glorious, right? So they sell 500 cars a month at 2,500 per copy, and then make about say 25% net to gross because they have all this overhead. Then you have the other model, which is you got dealers kind of like ours that we're going to run lean. We're going to try and keep expenses at a minimum if we possibly can. It's not uncommon for stores to run over $5,000, per unit. And if you do that, couple that with minimum ad spend, keeping overhead low, a 45% net to gross is not uncommon. So if you crunch those two numbers, that store that sold 150 cars made more money. And at the end of the day, it's all about making money for your stock, whether it doesn't matter what company you're in, whether it's your stockholders or the owner of your company. That's what we're here to do. So, but again, that's just my opinion. So to answer that question is you would have to kind of give up that, do less with more. Do more with less mindset. To then move to that more order-taking, volume-based model, which not every store is set up to do, which you and I discussed, That not every salesperson can do that. So it's, I think that'll come to a head at some point.
Got it. So that net to gross sort of equation somehow, does sort of have some interplay with a move to modern retail marketing. So again, there's an intersection between where this industry potentially is going, how it's managed, the sale, from start to finish is managed, and then how that impacts sort of the whole net to gross model within a dealership. So it's all.
And I'm not saying that I'm not saying you can't have both. I just haven't seen it,
Right.
And so I'm not saying that, if you would have talked to me 3 years ago and said things would be going the way they are today, I'd say you're crazy. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't happen. That's
Right.
That's just my own take on it.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, it's really fascinating because as a consumer, you don't really think about any of this stuff. You go into the dealership and you look at some cars, or you go online and you look at some cars and you figure out which one you want, and then you just sort of work your way through the process of financing that car. So this is really interesting to sort of peel it back and see how the industry's had to change and how it potentially will change going forward. So it looks like you're personally leading virtually all the marketing activities for Apex. Do you have an agency that helps support that effort? And if so, what kind of things are they doing that most effectively helps you?
So we don't have an agency. If you think of the Apex Automotive Marketing as a football team, I'm like the quarterback, the head coach, the lineman. But I also have some vendors that serve as my assistant coaches, let's say, because I can't run SEO for 4 stores. I can't run the paid search campaigns for all 4 stores. So
Right.
I vet multiple different vendors to handle that for me, and then hold them accountable. We also have one guy. He's been with the store for 30 years, and he builds like one-off logos because I don't have a digital arts degree. I'm fairly decent in it, Microsoft Paint though. But he builds our commercials and stuff. But the rest of it, I'm doing it all in house. I'll be the first to admit that I'm sure that there's agencies out there that could do twice as good as I possibly could, but it comes down to being cost effective for the group.
Sure.
And if we can achieve nearly the same result without the added expense, that just makes sense for us.
Okay. So you said you're going outside for SEO. Are there other things that you go outside to use to support your marketing efforts?
Yeah, sometimes you have to do that for co-op, which comes from the manufacturer, so they will co-op ad dollars for you, and they have a list of pre-approved vendors, right? So if I don't use those pre-approved vendors, I'm not going to get co-op dollars back, which then cuts down my expense, right? So the money I would have saved if I would have done it myself doesn't outweigh the money we're going to get back if we get a one-to-one match for that ad spend, right?
Yep, makes sense. And so just one last question. You said you aren't using agencies, but if an agency was trying to knock down your door and attempting to win, some business from you, what advice would you give that agency?
I would say let's leave all the fluff at the door. If when you're speaking with someone like myself, I want to talk about the minutia. I don't need the 100-slide presentation about why to use you. I don't want the sizzle. I don't even want the steak, to be honest. I want to talk to the farmer that raised the cow, right? So if there's an agency that's coming in there, you don't ever tell me that, like, hey, I got to get back to you on that one. Red flag. Because I, as one person, shouldn't know more than an entire agency about something, right? So that's my take there.
Okay. And any advice you'd give to a marketer thinking about bringing a new agency on board?
Yeah, I would say, a lot of things you're going to see is going to be hype, which they're going to have to do in order to position themselves in a competitive marketplace. So you got to look past that. You got to use common business sense. Like, does this pass the sniff test? Like, is this agency say they're going to guarantee an additional 50 sales? But are they going to attribute that because they sent out 500,000 email blasts and ran a 1 million impression display ad? Now they're saying they influenced those sales. Like, if that doesn't make sense, it doesn't pass that sniff test. So really look for agencies that are going to focus on just incremental sales. If they're not providing you that incremental sale, then you're basically spending money to sell cars that you would have sold yourself. So.
Yeah. Well, great, John. Listen, really appreciate the time that you've given me today. It's been great getting to know the auto dealership industry in a way that I'm sure most of our listeners don't know about, and it's just you guys are in the middle of some interesting times, and I'm sure that as you said, I know that's not the opinion of Apex, it's sort of your perspective, some interesting perspective relative to where things might go, as we look forward. And so I'm sure, forward-thinking, sort of consumer-centric dealerships that recognize sort of where they can bring value and where they can't, are going to be those dealerships that ultimately survive. And I'm sure there will be, and I don't know if you're seeing it or not, but I'm sure there will be some dealerships that just can't muscle their way through all of these changes.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot of the big players like Sonic Automotive, Lithia, Group 1. You're seeing them buy up a lot of the smaller stores.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, like dealer acquisition, I think is at an all-time high. Don't quote me on it, but I want to say it's right up there. So, the larger groups are getting larger, and the smaller independents like us, we just got to stay nimble, and lean, like we talked about.
Yep. Cool. Well, listen, John, thank you so much for making the time today, and wish you all the best through the balance of the week, and hope you have a great weekend.
All right, you as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks a lot.